Now, the Tennessee Valley's certified most accurate forecast from the Fox 54 Weather Impact Team.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Chief Meteorologist Jordan Dressman. Weather Impact Chief Meteorologist Jordan Dressman. Let's talk about the winter forecast as we get ready to finish off 2024 and head into 2025. Now, I'm not here to completely and totally dampen your spirits, so I want to talk about average snow across North Alabama, southern Middle Tennessee. And we have had some exciting winters here over the last couple of years. Remember, about 2 or 3 years ago when we had that bitter cold move into North Alabama, southern Middle Tennessee, right around Christmas time. Remember a couple of more years ago, I believe it was right around 2020 or 2021, where many folks across the Tennessee Valley picked up 5 and 6 inches of snow just in one random evening over the course of a couple of hours. Remember, January of 2024, where many locations across the Tennessee Valley got right around 1¼ inches of ice, in many cases shutting parts of North Alabama down, even up across southern Middle Tennessee for an entire week. It seemed like the kids were out of school for a week. That ice just simply wouldn't melt because that ice came to the Tennessee Valley and then it got incredibly cold. So while we enjoyed sunshine, that ice still wasn't able to melt. Yes, we have had some exciting winters across the Tennessee Valley, but on average, the Tennessee Valley receives 2.4 inches of snow during the winter season. Now, what do I mean by the winter season? The winter solstice typically right around December 21st or December 22nd, but meteorologically, we don't use those finite dates. We typically break everything into chunks. So by the winter season, we're more talking about December, January, and then the month of February. Of course, January and February of 2025. As we head into this winter, we're going to be talking about a La Nina setup. Now, what is a La Nina? Maybe you've heard La Nina, El Nino, translated directly to Spanish. It's little boy and little girl. But the La Nina and the El Nino aspects of weather, and we're not talking about a small defined aspect of weather. At this point, we're talking about global impacts of weather. While this impacts weather globally, it impacts weather also locally. So we have to use these global aspects to determine how our weather locally across the Tennessee Valley is going to be impacted. As we head into the winter, La Nina is going to become a little bit stronger. At its most basic level, La Nina talks about stronger trade winds. We're moving from the east to the west, and the waters of the equatorial Pacific are typically a little bit cooler. There's also typically a little more wind shear in the equatorial Pacific. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything for us. What matters for us is typically the lack of wind shear in the tropics. A lack of wind shear typically means there's an increase in tropical activity, but La Nina hasn't been prevalent through the entire summer, so we haven't necessarily seen a great increase in the amount of tropical activity during the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. La Nina is also characterized by an area of high pressure back off across the western part of the United States. Actually, this area of high pressure typically ends up setting itself up just to the south of Alaska. Now, if we were talking about an El Nino, we'd be talking about an area of low pressure. And that area of high pressure ends up being really important because it helps drive our jet stream. And the jet stream ends up being in a position such that we end up talking about warmer than average weather across the southeast, and that ends up backing off into the southwest just a little bit. So temperatures typically under a La Nina setup tend to be a little bit warmer than average. Now let's talk about precipitation. When we're talking about a La Nina setup, typically we are drier than average, really across the bottom half of the continental United States. We're not just talking about the southeast, we're extending all the way down into Florida, and then those drier conditions typically extend all the way into the southwest, and then even as we head into the west coast, Southern California, also typically a little drier than average. Once you get to the Midwest and parts of the Northeast, now you're talking about wetter than average conditions. And then wetter than average conditions also typically set up across the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, getting into Idaho. Those folks typically end up talking about a large increase in the amount of snowfall, which is something they like because so much of the economy across the Pacific Northwest as we head into the winter months is driven by the people that go there to ski and snowboard and enjoy all of the snow activities that the Pacific Northwest typically brings. Listen, I lived in Idaho for a couple of years. I like the snow, but I'm not any good at snowboarding. I'm not any good at skiing. Really wasn't my vibe. So while there was a La Nina setup a couple of times while I was living in Idaho, it wasn't really something I was overly excited about. I wasn't excited about this increase in precipitation because, well, not only do I not really like winter sports, but I just don't simply know how to do them. And frankly, if we're being totally honest, they kind of scare me a little bit, those winter sports. I'm always afraid that something's going to end up happening. So let's talk about the official forecast across North Alabama, southern Middle Tennessee. That temperature outlook as we head into winter 2024 and then heading into 2025. There's about a 50 to 60% chance that we're going to be talking about above average temperatures across North Alabama, southern Middle Tennessee. Now, does that mean we're going to be talking about like temperatures in the 70s and 80s at Christmas? No, definitely not. By the time we get to Christmas, the average high temperature is somewhere in the low and mid 50s. So we could be talking about high temperatures maybe in the mid and upper 50s. And then if we look at precipitation, again, it does look like we could see below average precipitation across the southeast. So the combination of the above average temperatures and the below average precipitation, just looking on the surface, would somewhat limit our abilities to get a little bit of snow. But then across the Pacific Northwest, it's going to be colder and wetter than normal, which would imply that they're going to get a little more snow. Good news, maybe some of you like to vacation across the Pacific Northwest. Maybe some of you aren't like me. Maybe you enjoy those winter sports. Maybe you actually know how to snowboard. Maybe you actually know how to ski, and that's something you enjoy. Maybe you've got some family across the upper Midwest, up into the upper peninsula of Michigan. Again, forecast to be a little cooler and wetter up in that part of the country as well. So maybe you're going to be vacationing there for Christmas. The odds of a white Christmas in these locations, highlighted by the higher than normal chances of precipitation, see a much greater chance at getting a white Christmas. Our chance on any given year across the Tennessee Valley for a white Christmas is already low, but this year, if we're talking about a La Nina setup, that chance for a white Christmas is going to be even lower. Let's summarize, shall we? What does a La Nina mean for us as we head into winter 2024, early 2025? Warmer than average temperatures across the Tennessee Valley, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be talking about temperatures in the 70s and 80s at Christmas time. It could mean we're just talking about slightly warmer conditions. Remember, if the average high temperature is 51 degrees, but the observed high temperature was 52 degrees, well, then it was technically above average, even though it was only a degree. Near normal or just below normal precipitation. That's what we're talking about across the Tennessee Valley. So while we're probably not going to be talking about a great deal of snow, this also applies to the rain forecast. We always focus on snow during the winter, but here across the south, of course, we're probably, odds are better than not, going to end up getting rain. Rain would also be forecast to be below average. Just an outlook for the season as a whole. Again, I'm not trying to dampen your spirits. I don't totally want to take away from the fact that, I don't want you to think that we're not going to get any snow this year. Of course, there's always a chance. Again, I showed you that average right off the bat. Typically, we get right around 2.4 inches of snow on any given year. So I'm not trying to dampen your spirits. I'm just trying to give you a seasonal outlook as we get ready to finish off the fall season and head into the winter.